we'll start out by discussing television. And by the way, you may have read or seen some information about the Super Bowl and the ratings and so forth. Well, when they first issued the numbers, which were preliminary in nature, the numbers came out to something like 94.8 million total viewers, which was the second most watched Super Bowl, behind last year's Giants-Patriots game. Okay. And normally they get those numbers from the top 25 markets, which represent almost 50% of the U.S. Okay. So, but as the other data starts to come in, the numbers may change slightly, and they did. Now they said it's the most watched Super Bowl. So last year, I believe, was 97.5 million people watched the Super Bowl. This year, they're saying it's 98 and change. Okay, so they added a few more people. Maybe they added those people in bars. Who knows? But actually, they're not surveying that yet. Okay. Now, the way that Nielsen does the research, they use various devices. Okay. For the national sample, what do they use? What is it called? I mean, up there it says people meter, but that's what it is called. But do you have any idea what it is? How it's hooked up? Who has it? Kate? It's, in a sense, it sort of is a census, but the census actually surveys everyone in the United States. This one doesn't. Right there, it's telling you that there's a sample of 10,000 households. Okay. But how is this device? Do any of you know anyone who's a family in a people meter household? No, don't know anyone? Never heard of anyone? First of all, they're supposed to keep it confidential, but usually people love to talk and they'll say something. Denise?
Everybody has a different code in the family, right? And then when they go on the TV to watch it, they type in the code before they do it?
Well, they don't really type in a code. Let's make believe for the moment that that device there, that box underneath the television, is a people meter. Okay. Nielsen randomly selects a certain number of households. Okay. Actually, there's about 10,000. And in these households, what they do is they hook up what is called a people meter. Okay. And the people meter is that particular box. There also happens to be a remote that comes with it. Okay. So on the remote, there are numbers, and each number represents someone in the family. Okay. And the box itself also has these buttons which represent someone in the family. Okay. So the way it works is you come into the room. Okay. Normally, we're all too lazy to go up to the television where the box is, so we get the remote, and you press your number. Okay. First, you turn the television on, and then you press your designated number, which signifies that you're in the room. Okay. And if someone else comes into the room, another family member comes in, that person presses the button that represents them. So now Nielsen knows that you're in the room, right? And you're watching TV. Now, what happens to many of us as we're watching TV? Do other stuff. Like what? What do you do?
I don't know, like on the computer.
Yeah, you may be on the computer if you're near it and so forth. Okay. What else do people do? Eat, so forth. Anybody doze off and do one of those? Yeah. Okay. So what happens, though, well, if you're dozing off, that's a problem. But every 20 minutes, approximately every 20 minutes, a little red light goes on that box, which is near your television. And the red light says, please, if you're still in the room, could you just press your number to signify that you're still here? Okay. So that's how they know that you're in the room. Okay. Now, if you leave the room, they say, press the button to signify that you're out of the room now. So you're out of the room. Then when you come back and so forth. All right. Now, what are some of the problems that you think may come with this? Yes?
If someone's sibling was on the television and then they come in there and then they want to watch, they might just change the TV and then...
Well, I mean, they change the channel?
I mean, then there would be a different person on it and it would be a different show. They wouldn't be getting the...
Yeah, and unless the other person signified that they're still in the room, you don't really know who's watching. Okay. as with any sample, even though it says that there are 10,000 households that have this people meter, there's always a problem with some of them. In the example of, let's say that you're the only person in the household right now who's watching television, and you do one of those, and you doze off for an hour and a half or two, as I've done a number of times. Okay? Obviously, you're sleeping. The red light is flashing, but you don't see it. TV station hasn't changed, right? So Nielsen said, throw it out. Okay? So you may have about 10% of that sample where the data is really not very usable at all. Okay? Things such as weather-related problems, power failures, and so forth. A number of years ago when the whole Northeast was blacked out, well, there was no data for that evening. Okay? Now, it says up there that also talks about the local markets, and you see where it says odometers and diaries. Okay. Let me just show you this map here. This map shows how Nielsen breaks up the entire country into television markets. See at the top it says designated market areas. Okay? That's what a DMA is, a designated market area. Okay? All of the markets that you see in the turquoise, okay, have local people meters. So New York is actually, we've evolved from having diaries and odometers into local people meters. Okay? The markets that are in the yellow, and again, those top 10 markets, it's probably about 12 now because they keep rolling them out. But those 10 markets are about 25% of the United States. The yellow markets have an odometer and a diary. Okay? And the areas in white only have diaries. All right? So, let's talk a little bit about that. And I'll show you a local diary. This was a student of mine from about 3 years ago. And she lives in Toland, Connecticut, which I guess is probably part of the Hartford, New Haven television market. And if you look at this, and this is for a particular week, okay, it says for the week starting February 17th and whatever that particular year was, and look at this. Basically, every 15 minutes, you have to write in here what you were watching. What station was it? What program was it? Okay. What the name of the show was, and so forth. Okay. So, anybody ever fill out what's called a timesheet at work? Okay. And usually a timesheet you hand in at the end of the week, correct? But how many of you actually fill it out every day? How many of you wait till the end of the week to fill it out? Okay. You wait till the end of the week to fill it out. So what's the problem with that? Yeah. You forget. Okay. So one of the problems with a diary is, one, you forget to fill it out. Okay. Now, in this particular case, you would put, a lot of people now fill it out, let's say, on Sunday. And they go back, oh my God, what did I watch on Monday? Okay. Well, I usually watch this. So you put down what's called habitual viewing. But maybe that night you didn't watch that. Okay. Maybe you watched something else. Now, this part of the U.S., or these markets here, okay, that are in white, that only have the diaries. Oh my God, that's such a big part of the country. What happens if that all the information is incorrect? Well, geographically it looks like a lot. Trust me, in a lot of these states there are more cows than people. Okay? These markets really only probably represent less than 25% of the United States. So it's not that they're not important. They are, but they're not as important as some of the other markets. And now, in those markets that we saw that were in yellow, in markets that have a diary plus what's called an odometer, in this particular case, you have two separate samples. The group of people who have the diary, those households that have the diary, are different than the households that have the odometer. Okay. An odometer is very similar to a people meter. It's hooked up to the television, okay, and all it records is whether the television is on, whether the television is off, and what station it's tuned to. That's all it does. Okay. The diary are, quote, the people who was watching. Now, even though they're different samples, they're demographically matched samples. So that they're saying, well, the people in the households that have the odometer are demographically similar to the people who have the diary. Okay. Now, here there's a little bit more of a check and balance. The odometer homes say, oh, in these days and hours you're watching these TV shows. The diary may correspond to that. When it doesn't correspond, say, well, wait a minute, if these households on the odometer were watching this, why are the people with the diary saying that they're watching this? There's a problem here. Again, you throw that information out. And again, statistically, it's about 10% of it. Okay? The people meter came into effect in the mid-1980s. Okay? And one of the problems was that all of a sudden, the network started to complain because the audiences for all of the TV shows were lower. Oh, so the first thing, obviously there's something wrong. This is no good. We need to go back to what we were doing before. Well, the industry says no. It's better data. Think about this. You have an electronic device. Yes, not everything is perfect, but this is better. There's an electronic device, now this people meter in the household. Okay. It tells you whether the TV's on, whether it's off, what TV stations you're watching. And guess what? People come in and press their buttons, so now we know exactly who's watching. So they would know if if my household was a people meter family, they know how many members are in my household. Okay. They know me, because I had to fill out a form. They know I'm a male of this age group. I earn this amount of money and so forth. This is the job function that I have. They know what my wife, my kids. Okay. That was an interesting thing once, that a competing company was using infrared rays to scan who was in the room. But the problem there was, what happened if your cat or dog went by? Was it counted as a person or was it counted as an animal? They really couldn't tell, because it sensed the body. Question, Jackie.
If you have like a people in your house or someone with an odometer, can you DVR stuff or TiVo? Like, how do they handle that?
Oh yeah, no, they're hooked up to those devices. Okay, they do. Actually, here, if we look at, for example, and we have to see which. I think it's this one here. This is Nielsen's site, and one of the things that we'll look at here is, for example, the national sample. Just wait for this thing to load up. And it gives you a brief explanation. Okay. Now, the numbers tend to deviate from time to time. Because I told you 10,000, that says 9,000. I actually spoke to Nielsen yesterday, it's 10,000. Okay, and it's growing slightly. All right. So it says here, data is collected electronically every night, every single night, because all these boxes are hooked up to phone lines. And Nielsen's data processing center is down in Florida. And all of this information flows into them, okay, for the national sample. For the local samples, it's in different areas. And you can see there, it says, which are installed in sample homes on TV sets, VCRs, cable boxes, and even satellite dishes. And people meters provide reliable information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, the other thing that he wanted to also mention is that in that household that has a people meter or even an odometer, you may have 5 televisions in the household. Okay. If that television measures 7 inches, at least 7 inches diagonally, every TV set is hooked up. Okay. So here, think about in your household, how many TVs are there?
At least 5.
At least 5. So mom could be watching something, dad could be watching something on that TV, you're watching something on the other TV, and your sister or brother's watching something else on another TV. Now, this is perfect in the sense that, oh, they know that that television is you. They know what you're watching. So you don't have that problem with only 1 or 2 televisions. Everybody comes down and wants to hog the remote, and who's watching and flipping and so forth. So they have all of this information. Nielsen actually records the viewing, to what you're watching, second by second. They know. They report the information in what are called quarter hours. So if a program is on, let's say, from 9 to 10 o'clock, okay, you can see they publish the ratings from 9 to 9:15, 9:15 to 9:30, 9:30 to 9:45, and then 9:45 to 10 o'clock. So you can see by quarter hour what the ratings are of programs, and they average it out. And they'll give you the average for the program. Now remember, everything that we're talking about here, as we had mentioned last week, is the rating to the program. Okay. What do you think the advertisers are more interested in? The rating to the commercials. Okay. And as we talked, the commercial ratings didn't start out until, well, they didn't start measuring commercial ratings until May of 2007. And as we had discussed, those ratings are for the commercials, the average of the commercial within that half-hour show. Within that hour show, they still cannot measure the individual rating of each commercial.
So the people meters and the automated, well, actually people meters, doesn't measure because they watch the television show and the advertisement separately? Like if they watch the advertising?
It's recording it. Yeah, it's recording it all at once, because what happens is, remember, I just mentioned that it performs the count second by second. All right? So they know when the commercial break comes on. Okay. Now, what do you guys do when the commercial break comes on?
Change the channel.
Ah, you change the channel, yeah. So now they know you're switching. So you switched out of watching the commercial. All of a sudden, X amount of people switched. So naturally, the commercial ratings are going to be lower. Many times, well, the only time I think that they're higher, if they ever are higher, are during the Super Bowl, because a lot of people could care less about the game, and they just want to see all the new commercials, even though the consensus was for these recent Super Bowl that the commercials were pretty bad. Yeah, so there was really nothing breakthrough there, with a couple of exceptions and so forth. Okay. So and if you go to Nielsen's site, there's quite a bit of information on it. Now, any questions on the television part? Who has a question? No? I have a question for you. Well, how often does Nielsen, you've got national ratings, you have these local ratings, how often do they actually issue these reports? We'll start with the easy one first. Well, the people meter 24/7, right? So how often do you think they're actually measuring this stuff? 24/7. Right, exactly. Well, they issue reports on a daily basis. You would know the next day, roughly with the overnights from the top 25 markets, what the ratings are, and 2 days later you get the people information. So they know all this stuff. And they basically will release this type of information to the agencies and to the broadcast networks and the cable networks and so forth on a weekly basis. Okay. Yes?
How many people do they have working to compile all these results?
Oh, down at Nielsen's headquarters?
Yeah.
Probably hundreds of them. Okay, hundreds of them. The thing is that once someone asks me and says, well, wait a minute, if they're recording this information on a second-by-second basis, okay, Shouldn't they be able to give you all this information and then the individual commercials and so on? Think about it, though, second by second. Could you just imagine the volume of information you would have to dissect? It's virtually impossible. There's just too much data. Everybody likes to have a lot of data. Okay? Then sometimes too much is too much data. You can't digest it. Okay? Now, let's think about this other thing for a moment. We said these people meters. There are 10,000 of them, right? There are, in the United States, how many TV households do you think there are in the U.S.?
We talked about this last week.
Yeah. You remember? No, you don't
Talking
remember.
about it.
Okay, we're sorry. How many? Kate, what do you think? Take a guess. Don't worry if you're right or wrong. I'll give you a hint. It's in the millions, so we'll start from there.
Maybe like 500 million.
That's a little too much. A little bit less. Rachel?
I would say
250. Well, a little bit less. About half. What's half of that? Well, it's 114. Okay. We have 114 million TV homes, which is about 98% of all the homes in the United States. So that means that there's 2.5% of homes in the U.S. that do not have a television. Does anybody here know any family that does not have a television? Ah, 2. My God, that's 3. What? That's more than I've ever heard in the class. What do these people do?
I think like I babysit these kids, and I don't think that they're kind of ready for them to
Yeah.
watch Romano.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. That's how many TV homes there are in the U.S., right? What's the sample of people meters? What's wrong with this picture? It's way too small, huh? How many of you think it's too small? How many of you think it's too big? How many of you think it's just about right? How many of you have taken research methods so far? You've taken it already, or are you taking it now? You're taking it now?
No.
Oh, you took it. Oh, all right. So, with the exception of the census, which is done every 10 years and measures every single household, okay, all of the research that we're talking about and that we will talk about in this class comes from a sample. Okay. You just can't sample everyone. It's too much money. Okay. And statistically, when they look at these 10,000 households, statistically, they'll say something to the effect as follows, and you've probably heard this, and you should have heard this in your market research class, and I'm sure you did. Oh, that sample is statistically reliable because it has a 95% confidence level. 95% confidence level. Kate, what do you think that means? Take a guess. 95% confidence is the key word. Oh.
Well, they're pretty sure.
They're pretty sure. Right, we're getting there. Tansy, what do you think? Yeah, exactly right. Okay. What it means, in more simple terms, it means that if you did this test 100 times, it will come out the same 95 times. And one says, well, I don't want 95, I want 100. First of all, you can never get 100. But someone says, well, what about if we did it at 98% confidence level? I says, all right, yeah, we could do that, but guess what? Instead of 10,000 households, it's going to be 40,000 households. So now you quadruple the sample. So to get 3 more percentage points of confidence, meaning that if you did the test 100 times, now it comes out right 98 times, you have to quadruple the sample. And again, it's a function of money. It costs money to do that. Okay? So it's that statistically, they've done these tests over and over and over. Okay? And it comes out pretty much the same all the time. So From that standpoint, there's really no need to even go to 20,000. Yes, wait.
Yeah, do people ask if you involve them, or if you didn't know from people?
You can't ask. It's strictly anonymous. They will call you. It's a random sample. Yeah. They'll go through the phone book, let's say, and every nth name they'll select. And they'll ask people to cooperate and so forth. Now, would you like to be a Needs for People Meter household?
Well, I have, on our computer, we have it. It's smart too, like when you're on, like my home computer. It's like if I'm on, I'll have to hit my name, and then I just go on.
All right. But they're checking you in terms of on your computer, what you're doing on the computer, which we'll talk about later. Yeah, correct. Okay. Now, yes. You don't have to. A lot of people will participate. You get very little for doing it. You may get, I don't know, $20 a month, and if your TV breaks, they'll fix it. That's really it. Okay. But people, there's what's called in the industry, it's called churn. It turns over. 1/3 of the sample turns over. On the People Meter household, probably every 9 months or so. When it comes to these things, and diaries, forget it. People just don't want to hassle with it. Tansy? No, they can still use it, sure. Yeah, yeah. Because think about this now, in terms of the pay cable, only about 28 or 30% of all the TV households have HBO. So you couldn't measure just those homes that have pay cable, because now you've eliminated the other 70%. So now you start to skew the numbers too much one way. Okay, so there's a representative sample of all of those. Okay. Now these markets here, when we were talking about how often do they get measured, the areas in white, okay, they get measured at least 4 times a year. And in those 4 times a year, they are called what? I'm sure you've heard the term. Yeah, they're quarters of the year, but the industry refers to them as sweeps. Right. It's the sweep months. Okay. You're actually in one right now. So one of the months is what? February. Okay. So you have February. What are the others? May. Good. Month before? July, yes. Okay. So you have July. And what's the next one? November. Correct. Good. Great. Okay. So those markets are guaranteed to have ratings at least 4 times a year. Now, what is interesting about these 4 months? And let me rephrase that, and let's concentrate on February. What is it that you do not see on television during the month of February? Reruns, exactly right. It's a sweet month. I want a lot of viewership. I being the TV station, I'm not going to run reruns. And people say, I've seen that before. They want to jack up the ratings. So in those markets that only get the 4 months, those stations say, all right, so for the period of January, February, and March, February's that mid-month, I'm pricing all of my programming based on the February. Now, if you're a very good television buyer, what would you say to that station? What happened in the month of January? What were you watching mostly? Right. So in February, if new shows get higher ratings, and in January they get lower ratings, you as the buyer would say, well, wait a minute, you can't charge me the same amount of money in January and even in March that you charge me in February. So you have to make adjustments. If CSI is a rerun in January, they're going to get a lower rate than they would be for a new episode that's going to air in February. So a buyer recognizes that and makes the adjustments. Now, some of you may say, well, wait a minute, in July there's no new shows. It's all reruns. And that's not necessarily true. When a number of years ago, back in the mid-'80s, when Fox became a network, they had a lot of new shows that they introduced. Maybe you guys were a bit too young, but I'm sure you probably saw them in reruns. Ever hear I'm not talking about the original Beverly Hills 90210, okay? Melrose Place and shows like that. So what Fox did, says, let's run those shows in July and in August. So now we're going to get these younger people hooked on these shows. So come September, when NBC and ABC and CBS starts to run their new shows, we got them already. So on those nights when we have our shows, they're not going to watch the competition shows. Well, obviously some people migrated over and so forth, but they were able to capture an audience. And those shows became very popular. And everyone laughed at Fox and ABC, CBS, and NBC said, wait, nothing. What do we need a fourth network for? Guess who is the #1 network now? Fox.